Anders Monrad Rendtorff. Anders Monrad Rendtorff is Senior Vice President for Corporate Communications at Coloplast, the world's leading medtech company. Anders has been with Coloplast for over 3 years now and dedicates himself to building up a strong connection between HR and communications people in his company. Anders is also a regional coordinator for the European Association of Communication Directors in Denmark. If he wasn't working in corporate communications, Anders might be pursuing his romantic dream of being an old-fashioned, globe-trotting journalist. Please give a warm round of applause to Anders Monrad Rendtorff.
Does this work? Yeah. Hello. 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 Nice to be here. Nice to be here at a time that I didn't choose, but I'll do my best to entertain you a bit. I also would say I really liked your ending, Chief Collaborator. Maybe if I'm lucky, I would touch upon some of the same elements, maybe on a more tactical level. My topic today is the merge of HR and communications. And as this is late, I might want to start with a question to you. So the question I like you just to discuss for a minute is, what has been your most inspiring experience with HR and why? Just take a minute with the one next to you. What have been the most inspiring experience with HR? Please. And you all have to discuss and reflect a bit. It's called involvement. So please all do just a little bit. It doesn't really seem to work. I'm going to try later then. Of course, the questions you ask determine the direction you take. I'll try to touch upon that. What will I talk about? I will try to make my problem universal. I'm going to share with you what is my situation locally. I'll try to answer why has the merge of HR and communications helped with that problem. And the problem is, of course, the business problem that we face. And then I'll try to put in some elements of reflection, what could be the advantages of merging this. So let's start with the story of me, and I would, of course, try to position me as one of you. So Coloplast, my job in Coloplast is working with this field, integrated field of a variety of disciplines on a global level. Coloplast is a world leader within intimate healthcare. It's a niche. It's a 10 billion Danish kroner business that would be, let's say, 1.5 billion euro. So in this case, in this audience, it might not be the biggest, but it's one of the bigger in Denmark. And as you see, we, of course, have a lot of challenges. Working in healthcare means working with reimbursement. That means working with price pressure currently, and that makes, our problem is all over the world. No economy can afford healthcare as it is today, and that, of course, puts us under pressure. But we do quite well currently. I entered in 2008 as, you could say, a result of a shift of management. We didn't do really well in Coloplast. We made money, but not enough. And this has been a very prominent business for 50 years. But we felt we don't do it anymore. Also, growth was okay, but not nearly enough. So for us, it called for a turnaround. So the last 3 years has been quite nice in terms of getting the house in order. We have today an EBIT around 30%, which qualifies us to be among the best in the world with regards to our profitability. And the growth is okay. As a global market leader, we are a bit above the general market growth, so we take market share. And then you could say, nice little story, it's ended. But we happen to be quite ambitious as well. So if I can point, we need to go further. We need to have more growth, and we need to establish more growth. Instead of growth, I mean profitability, a better EBIT. So it's very simple. I think most of you would share a problem like that. What really happened in 2008 was that, as you see, we started focusing on re-establishing profitability in the company. We thought that over some time we would reach a situation where we could start talking about growth. But to start with, we did not talk about growth. We made a simple strategy. Most of you would know these three-phased strategies. First one, diet to lifestyle change. We need to, as you just talked about, be a little thinner. We spent far too much money. So we wanted the company to get used to a cost behavior that was far lower. But then if you lose weight, you might want to train a little bit. You might want to go to this fitness center to regain some muscle. In our case, that meant that we might want to get ready to win in the third stage, so let's train the sales force. Let's be far more professional when going out there to conquer the market. And then the third stage, winning, nobody at that time knew exactly what that meant. Right now, as you saw the numbers before, we are around here. What we have done is actually, I think, named the situation as a burning platform. And in a burning platform, the situation almost speaks for itself. In terms of communications, we can really use good old mass communications. We can tell people what they need to do. In our case, we use the phrase straightforward. We wanted to make people understand the rationale for changes because then they could comply. Actually, we were extremely transparent. We talked a lot about what didn't work in order to exactly make people understand that. Make people understand that. Now, we would say we can't really use the same recipe because in this, if I say the cost paradigm that we have used here, which is the few to many, the simple agenda, you could say repeated mass communication of very, very focused content that makes people comply. But in this situation, we call it a burning ambition. We desperately want to go somewhere good instead of leaving something desperately. Then suddenly the same mass management that used to tell what people should do, they should actually start trying to enable people to do what they think is right in terms of coming up there. There might be some elements of the swarm in this. How can this organization actually do the right thing by themselves? Maybe it's also the difference in this field here. You could say it's old-fashioned management. We tell people where to go, and they need to do the same thing again and again. Very instructive, as opposed to another version of management. We could call it leadership. We go and try and search for something over here. Please follow me. And to conclude, you could say we watch people in this paradigm as objects of change, as opposed to what I face right now. What do I need to do if people are to be understood as drivers of change? So what has that to do with people and communications, with HR and communications? Well, for me, we started 2 years ago by trying to answer a question like, what do we do in order to manage transformation and leadership development? One thing is transformation. You can use that in the cost paradigm. We want to make a turnaround. How much leadership do we really need? But in terms of conquering the market, winning, we thought, and that was just an assumption, I don't have any data on it, we just thought that it could be clever to have better qualified leaders. Locally, we have around 800 of them. Better qualified, because that might be the only instrument that can give us a far better performance than we have today. That we thought already some time ago, but it takes a bit of time to foster that. So that's actually the question that led to what we did. What did we do? First of all, we merged corporate communications, and HR. This is just how it looks. So what I represent is actually, you could say, a triple integrated department as, sorry about that, as Newson Consultancy is a team that consists of an integrated external and internal group, so most of the people in there that work with both dimensions. I have public affairs and corporate responsibility in that box called external affairs. And then we have HR and leadership. We do not have the transactional part of HR. It's with finance, salary, etc. So you could say I have the stuff where we can see some synergies. And then we have just marked that we, of course, work with a lot of other groups and come together around messaging. So the first thing we did was let's merge it. The second thing we did was starting to work together. You could say for 20 years I had worked with, in collaboration with HR, always as the communicator. I actually, when I searched for it, I would find some inspiration, but maybe not always so much. I had my own assumptions of HR. Now, when I took responsibility for it, I must admit that I had to refresh my assumption. It actually is a nice discipline with a lot of depth. But having worked 20 years without understanding that, I thought, let's better start working together. So this is an example of what we did together. The first one, we made leadership principles. Well, all companies have leadership principles. Ours was based on what we really did, and we made them together, and then we visualized it. I can actually remember all of them today because I can visualize them. So I think in this case, the communication and HR people worked genuinely together in a very creative format. This is one of two slides that might be trivial to you, very, very simple. But I guess most of your companies have constantly changes in the organization. People are laid off, we need to make a more efficient way of organizing, blah, 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 blah. And typically communications are in that process. Typically the HR business partner are in this process. What we just said is it's mandatory to make one common plan. Mandatory. I could say that because I am responsible for the group. But take a look from the let's say the sales SVP, or not the sales, the IT responsible. Does he get a better solution when it's worked together than two plans that try to, well, solve the same problem, but from two different angles? My answer is, of course, yes. And now the emerging markets, Asia, Pacific, they did the same. So now we have teams, and we are not more people than you saw. It's around 20 people in the group on a global level, but they just need to work so much more together. So this is actually, I've tried to put out take out the dates, etc. But this is actually a one-pager that in this case, the sales SVP for emerging markets receives. One plan made together. I would find that extremely practical. We do make a lot of meetings. You could say smaller conferences like the one we have today. This is a picture from R&D, Global Research and Development. There are around 150 people. They meet on a regular basis. So if communications were to arrange these events, we would typically talk with John, the SVP, about what topics are up and what should we talk about, and make a quite entertaining, good show. We wanted to entertain people. So now when we have the opportunity to work with HR, we could say that HR know the real issues, the real stuff, what is really going on, and communications have the tools to address them. Simple, I know. I know actually it's extremely simple, but it's just a function of these people working together about the same objective rather than not. So now it's not only the SVP on stage, it's actually the engineers or the developers that talk about their issues, but funny enough, it's relatively relevant for the colleagues in R&D. And they are often pleased with not listening to the SVP for R&D. Simple again, But my point is, we get better content to this event by talking with the HR business partner competence. And the last practical example is that we have actually transferred a lot of production from Denmark to Hungary and China. So that means a lot of good, well-qualified Danish people that never thought they were going to be laid off, they just don't have a job anymore. And that's not a good story in this society that we happen to live in the northern part of Zealand. On the other hand, based on our knowledge of what is really going on, in this little case, we actually succeeded in the story around old-fashioned blue-collar work. There's no room for that. But relatively qualified prototyping work, taking the best Danish handicraft tradition for these very same, but fewer of them, employees, actually has made us successfully keep a lot of working places in Denmark. Yeah. Is it the whole truth? No, it's a mix of various things, but it's okay. It's just the framing that is far more interesting. Again, I would say our media work just gets more quality by having this content from HR. Simple, I know, simple applications of the merge of HR and communications. So why would I think that this is interesting? I think my key point would be a slide like this. So this slide touches upon one of the buzzwords that we have heard several times today, involvement. So it actually says, if you want change or transformation, you get most of that if you involve people. So seen from a communications perspective, what we are very good at is a lot of tools and channels. So let's say that I'm faced with a challenge of change in a department or a division. So my answer would typically be, let's make more communications. Can you recognize that feeling or that end? Or I've heard about others that say that. I've heard about others saying that. But it doesn't really work. It builds awareness, it builds understanding, and they are requirements, they are hygiene factors, but it might not drive the change. What drives the change is, I guess, what we all know. It's the interaction with our manager, our closest manager. It's all these processes. There was a discussion earlier about engagement. I got the feeling that we could discuss why should HR own a people survey, engagement survey. And I got the feeling that the assumption was it's far better to have it in communications. Well, you could think about it differently. There's a lot of, typically in an organization, we have the people processes. You have the annual or biannual appraisal conversation. You might have a people review. Some of you even have salary review. These are instances where you actually discuss and get a very clear feedback from your manager. So a point that I have learned around the people survey is, we have just had one, actually we had an engagement index on 72, which for our industry is quite nice, based on, especially nice when we have been through this turnaround, that the results of the engagement survey actually leads directly into a people review that leads directly into what we call a PDP. It's called, let's call it an appraisal conversation, and ends with a salary conversation. For the employee, it's 4 interactions or 4 interventions that are far more important than all our intranet newsletters or what have you. So to start understanding how to use this in a communications or even in a change context is a very valuable insight. And for me, it has been the key reason for how to understand the merge of people in communications or communications in HR as valuable and helpful when wanting to transform a company to deliver a better performance and ultimately a far better financial performance. I have also tried to, and let me be humble, what can we learn from HR? What can HR learn from communications? And I know when I say we, I'm very much still a communicator. I've just got a bit more respect from HR. Because sometimes you could say that what are we? We are just a tool that needs some content to communicate. We are just a method or some processes, and we can campaign stuff, but it's seldom that we can campaign our own stuff, because what is that? I find there's a lot of good, relevant content in leadership development. So if HR can make the strategy, I'm relatively good at coupling that to business strategies to make it up to the big picture. If HR is more long-term oriented, more sustainable, we can use the pace that communications typically have, especially the pace that you have learned from working with media. And if we have initiative from HR, we can use our strength in positioning the stuff. And that leads me to, I think I could speak a long time on and I know it's only based on 2 years, but it's a lot of good elements that could be valuable for most organizations, and where I've found it very fruitful to own, or you could say to give a direction to the collaboration between HR and communications, rather than try to make a nice cooperation. It's okay, but it doesn't have the strength and the depth as, I guess, what I have experienced. And this might lead me to also answering what could be seen from this perspective, a future role for the communicator. Actually, I tried to be structured, but I guess you can remember my points. So maybe I should leave that in terms of time and just go to this one, where I see a role. I have spoken about the collaboration between HR internal communications. When I listen to a corporate chief collaborator, I would actually agree. What I represent is a contact or relation to a lot of stakeholders, externally and internally. And I guess my main point as such would be that for the future communicator, and let's just use the classic disciplines, you should be capable and comfortable to work what constitutes corporate communications as we know it. So customer communications, product communications, media relations, external relations, and internal relations. I think any of my communications consultants, they should be capable at that, because that's very practical when you go and solve your stuff. But as I know now, understand the HR part on the one hand, understand CSR, public affairs, and investor relations on the other hand, together, that actually constitutes a lot of the help that, let's say, my CEO needs when he wants to transform the company to this greater financial performance. And also, I think my examples has been chosen a bit deliberate in the sense that what works typically is when senior management see the prototype or see it, the tangible recommendation. Of course, you should be thoughtful, but I think also my story is about, please just go and do it so people can see what you're up to. I guess I could continue again and again, but I will just conclude here. Thanks for your attention.